Games Workshop's keeping news coming thick and fast for the Custodes. Today we have some interesting changes to the Captain Commander traits, another one of those martial katars that allow your weapons to shoot twice, and there's also a leaked stat line going around for the Virtus Praetor Jetbikes. Hello and welcome back to Warspec Tactics, where today we're doing another Custodes discussion video. As I'm sure most of you are aware by now, it's going on pre-order this Saturday, so this is the last week where Games Workshop is showing off a few of the other finer details from it. Let's talk about Captain Commanders and the previewed traits first, then talk about that new martial katar, and then go on to look at the Jetbike's new stats. First up, the Captain Commander traits are basically a mechanic that was introduced in Psychic Awakening War of the Spider. At the moment you pay a single command point, and you can upgrade one shield captain with a helpful trait. It's quite a useful ability for the Custodes. Their standard characters are really quite farty indeed. That generally only gets better with warlord traits and relics, and then you can make them into a complete monster by the addition of another trait on top of that. I was quite pleased with just how many of these were quite usable. There's one for +1 to advance and charge, one for +2 wounds, one for reroll wounds versus monsters and vehicles, an interesting one called Unstoppable Destroyer. You could do gamey things with that, like attack and then fall back, and one for a +3 inches to your aura abilities. Perhaps one of the most common places to see them was on the Virtus Praetor shield captain. At the moment you can just make him spectacularly hard to kill with a 3+ invul and a 5+ feel no pain, and then give him something else like +2 wounds or one of these fighting buffs. We already knew from the contents page that Games Workshop revealed earlier in the week that they are still present in the codex, and as I guessed, they are now a points cost upgrade rather than costing you a command point. It seems to be the trend with these sort of upgrades. Games Workshop not trying to give you too many things to deplete all your command points. Apparently now the Captain Commander traits are going to be split into 3 different categories, one for the standard shield captains in the Guardian pattern armour, one in the Alaris Terminator armour, and one for the Virtus Praetor captains. I think the split is fairly helpful to be honest, as otherwise if they all cost the same, you'd often get the most value just sticking them on the Jetbike one, as he's the biggest and the most threatening model. It seems that Games Workshop have previewed 5 of the new ones today, though I must admit at first glance I'm not particularly convinced they're any stronger than the previous ones. The first one that we have for the Guardian Commander, he can take Master of the Stances, which plays into that new martial katar ability, allowing one nearby core or character unit each turn to get both stances of their current martial katar. When that could be applied to a really big unit of Custodes, then that could be very meaningful. 6 Alaris Terminators or Virtus Praetors certainly seem like a massive unit to layer buffs like that on, though I think for the most part the katars are a little bit situational. Sometimes they'll be helpful, sometimes less so. I guess it could be helpful early game for the Callistus one, advancing 2d6 and dropping the lowest, plus shooting as if stationary. That'll be a bit of extra speed with no hindrance to your firepower. Or the Salvus one that we'll get onto later, extra range and extra shooting both look like they work well together. I would bear in mind though that each shield company should be able to get to double up on one katar for free, so that might make this one a little bit less useful, as you'll likely be doing one of them already. Next up for the Alaris Terminator shield captain, the Unstoppable Destroyer trait does appear to have been nerfed. Previously you could just use your boosted pilot and consolidation to hit an enemy and then just move straight out of combat, and then they wouldn't be able to fight you back. Now that's been changed to just +1 to advance and consolidate, so you're usually going to be moving 4 inches there. You can still go in any direction with it, but you still have to remain within engagement range of one enemy unit at the end of that move. I still think there is some interesting potential with that. It could certainly allow you to get a fair bit more movement out of your melee phases, and there's still the potential for some gamey things, such as maybe hitting one very hard enemy unit, doing a load of damage to them, and then using that free consolidate to move away and tag a different enemy unit, maybe one that isn't going to hit you quite as hard back in return. Still though, it doesn't look quite as reliably useful, and I don't think it's going to get taken anywhere near as much. The next one is a small change to Defiant to the last. I'm afraid again this one does look like a small nerf. +1 attack if the model's wounded, and +2 attacks if he's less than half wounds. This one used to be +1 attack per wound that they'd taken up to a maximum of 3, so that was quite a lot better. To me it does just look like they've toned down these traits a little bit, though to be honest that's certainly not to say that Adeptus Custodes are going to be getting weaker as a whole. And bear in mind that all your HQs are going to be getting a lot of extra special rules for free, things like their shield host tactics, and those martial katars that we already mentioned. Next up though we have the Virtus Praetor ones. I think the first one is kind of rubbish. I don't think Fierce Conqueror is going to be played very much. It gives you +2 attacks if you're within 2 inches of at least 6 enemy models. Whenever that goes off, yes it's a very decent buff, but say if you're tangling with enemy elites or vehicles, there's a very good chance that isn't going to happen, even with really quite a big base on the bike. I guess if it was super cheap then maybe you could justify it, but I don't really like these sort of combat buffs that only come up against certain opponents, and say not if you're playing against an army of vehicles. The other one though, I think I like quite a lot more, and I think might be my favourite out of any of them on this list. Tip of the Spear means that whenever you charge or make a heroic intervention, you get to reroll hit and wound rolls of 1 against your enemy targets. That's a really quite significant buff to the melee. Shield captains probably won't get to reroll hit rolls of 1 innately anymore, that'll likely just be for core units with their aura buff, so usually on the charge it's likely to be something like a 37% damage output increase. I feel that for a character as powerful as the Virtus Praetor captain, this one could easily be worth it, even if it costs a fair few points. To me though, that does potentially sound like they might not be getting their rerolls to wound with their interceptor lancers anymore, as otherwise that reroll wound rolls of 1 just seems a bit redundant. I guess we'll have to wait and see for the actual datasheet for that, but as we'll see in a second, the interceptor lance has gone up to strength 7, and there's always the potential for its charge rule to get changed to something else, say like +1 to wound or something, rather than reroll wounds. Still though, the Tip of the Spear one looks like the most impressive one out of these to me. I guess Master of Stances could be handy if you've got a really specific unit to revolve around one Qatar. Next up we have another revealed martial Qatar. These ones are the 6 abilities that you can choose to stack up pre-game. Usually you can go onto 1 and then maybe do stance 1 and then stance 2 individually, and one shield company gets to double up on one Qatar for at least 1 turn. The Salvus one looks like it's aimed to help out Custodes at range. Stance 1 is just a +4 inch range increase to weapons across the board. Not an enormous range boost, but I think enough to be mildly helpful. It'd certainly give you a bit more insurance as to anything that you weren't sure whether it was going to be in range or not. Usually these small range boosts tend to be better on anything that's really quite close range, so maybe things like flamers, sentinel blade fire, or pistols that they might have. All those might benefit a bit more from that. Stance 2 though I think is far more interesting, as it seems to be an army-wide shoot twice mechanic, but only for certain weapons. Apparently infantry units that don't advance get to fire twice with auric weapons when they shoot, and just because I can't really imagine what else there'd be, that sounds very much like it's going to be things like Guardian Spears and Castellan Axes. I think that's the sort of thing that they could allow to have a shoot twice on it, as when you pay the points for a Custode with a spear for example, most of the damage is going to be coming from melee and not at range, so while shooting twice is very nice indeed, I don't think it's exactly game breaking either. Still though, I think that this is one of the most powerful and interesting Qatar buffs that we've seen so far. It might be interesting if you could take an entire ton of Custodes infantry, and then run them in the shield company that gets this Qatar twice, then you could potentially have 2 turns worth of double shooting Custodes guns. Certainly seems like it might thin out some hordes, and all of the weapons being damaged too means that it will actually chip away at heavies as well. Finally, we've got some leaked stats for the Virtus Praetor Jetbikes as well, which kind of feeds into what we've been talking about already. Again, this is one of those packaging datasheets. We just get the stat lines and nothing else, but there are a few meaningful changes. The standard Jetbikes have gone up to 5 wounds from 4, so they're going to be a bit harder to take down now. I think that's just them trying to keep up with the ever-increasing damage spiral that is 40k. A couple of their weapons have seen tweaks as well. The Melter Missile looks genuinely dangerous at strength 8, AP-4, and now damage D3 plus 3, so that's a pretty massive improvement over damage D6. The Interceptor Lancers for the squad have gone to strength 7, AP-3, damage 2, they used to be strength 6 and damage D3, and I will be interested to see what sort of special rules they get on the charge, if any. As I said, I wouldn't be too surprised if they lose the reroll to wound, but maybe they might get something like +1 to wound instead. Finally, we've also got the profile for the Shield Captain on Dawn Eagle Jetbike. I like the way that he appears to have casually had one of the Captain Commander traits rolled into him, as it's gone up to a mighty 9 wounds, up from 7. I do like the way that they can casually fly around and be just about as hard to take down as a battle tank. He's also gained +1 attack, going from 5 to 6 as well, though seeing as he's likely to be losing access to his own rerolls as they'll be for core things, those two things do kind of cancel out. So a few more interesting bits and bobs there anyway. I'm looking forward to getting my hands on the full rules of the Custodes Codex. I'll most certainly be reviewing it in full once it comes out. Feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics if you'd like to see that, or just check back on the channel. I tend to post 40k related videos just about every day. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the things on the channel, I would just like to mention one way in which you can help support Auspex Tactics and keep the videos coming, and that's my Element Games affiliate link down in the video description below. Element Games is a UK based discount retailer. They usually give 10 to 20% off Games Workshop's miniatures, and if you do order anything after clicking the link, a small amount goes to Auspex Tactics without costing you any more whatsoever. Can just be a way to help support if you were thinking about ordering in some models sometime. For people over in the USA, there is also an Amazon link down there as well. Again, that works just the same. Click the link, buy literally anything from Amazon whatsoever, and a small amount goes to help support the channel. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.